Hi, and welcome to Gamers exPlane, a channel dedicated to tabletop role-playing games, particularly play-by-post using gamersplane.com. In the segment Player versus Player, I interview users from gamersplane in order to find out how people use the service and engage in play-by-post gaming. Hopefully, we will all learn from each other and improve our own games, and maybe have a little fun along the way. In today's episode, I interview a user named Knifesedgegames, and we discuss, well, whatever we want. In particular, we discussed the history of play-by-post gaming, going back to play-by-mail and play-by-email. And then we talked about long-form gaming, games lasting more than a few years. We also talked about how internet players often want to be actors, and is that more prevalent than extroverted players? We talked about whether or not old systems offer something different than newer systems, and is there a fear in more modern systems displacing older systems and the way that games are played. Anyway, I'm Qralloq, and this is Gamers exPlane, and you will now see Knifesedgegames. Hi, and welcome to Gamers exPlane. I'm Qralloq, and I have with me Knifesedgegames.
Hi, I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
Yeah.
How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. We've played together a lot over the years. I remember mentioning to Discord at one point, it's like, I hope he doesn't bring up that one time I just abandoned his Call of Cthulhu game, and then he just eviscerated my character before I even left.
You're lucky I don't hold grudges, yeah.
Yeah, so let's not bring that up.
Well, we've had a longer history with Eldrin and your character in the Warhammer game, so yeah. I think you've made up for any bad feeling you might have created.
Yeah. So that game was, I think, the Call of Cthulhu game was The Harvest. Was that the name of the?
That's right. Yeah, Time for Harvest, and we're currently on Chapter 6, which is the final episode of that game. So that's coming to an end soon, and that's been going on for a few years.
Yeah, a year and a half ago, I joined a Call of Cthulhu game at a mini con, so a live con held at a pub in Calgary, and we played that. So I got to actually play
right.
For the time.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So did you play right until the end? You saw the finale?
Yep. Oh,
awesome. Okay.
Yeah, it was probably abbreviated for a 4-hour game. But,
sure. Yeah. It's quite a different ending for what you typically see on Call of Cthulhu games.
Yeah.
The setting, I mean, which is a big secret. Nobody knows if they haven't played where it is, so I'm not going to say, but spoilers. Yeah.
So you've been around, you've played tabletop games probably back into the 80s, I guess.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I didn't know where to start with this because I've been playing some kind of game all my life. I've got an older brother who taught me chess at a very early age, and we used to play all kinds of board games. But around the time of Star Wars, I used to collect these Star Wars figures. I was about 10 or 11 years old in early 1980s when the little plastic figures. And I come from a small town, and we had one toy shop in this town. Every Saturday, me and my friends will be there picking out the latest of these Star Wars figures. And over on one side of the shop, they had all these old dusty boxes and these hardback books with strange creatures on the front. And Advanced D&D was there. And I remember the cover of Fiend Folio, with the sort of red demon kind of character on it. And that sort of drew my attention, but that was what the older kids were playing. We didn't know what that was. And then on my 12th birthday, so 1982, which is around maybe a year later than you started, from what I understand.
Yep.
My sister bought me the Red Box D&D set, and that's where it all really began with role-playing games. And me and my friend, there was only two of us using it. We didn't have a clue what to do. We figured out how to make characters. We figured out how to run a battle. So we were drawing sort of mazes and having little battles, but we didn't really get the concept of role-playing until this guy's older brother came along and said, oh yeah, I know how to do this. And he started GMing for us, and that was it. And it wasn't long after that, once we knew what we were doing, that I became the GM, and I've been the GM ever since. And I very rarely get to play, and most of the time I'm a GM.
Yeah.
So from that point, we then found other people that were interested, and we developed this little group, and we played from that point up until the late 90s, and through our teens and through early college years. And we had a group, and we were playing all kinds of games. So things like D&D, and mostly AD&D, so second edition D&D we were playing. Warhammer was a big game for us. The old Middle-earth role-playing game, the MERP, the Iron Crown Enterprises, Paranoia, Judge Dredd, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We did it all. And there was some of those summers we would play from 8 in the morning until midnight every day through a 6-week summer holiday. This group of us, and we didn't do anything else, and we lived on chips and Coke and that kind of stuff. Really unhealthy, but fantastic times, and some of the memories of those games were great. Then when I was the one that left the town, everybody else stayed in the town when we all turned 19 and went off to different colleges, and I left I went to the South Coast at that time, and then later to London, but basically our gaming group broke up. So I decided to, and I'd been playing play-by-post games, war games at that point, which I discovered through various zines and that kind of stuff. And I decided to start doing it myself. So I created basically my PBM, as it was called then, play-by-mail. And we figured out how to play a game. And it was obviously very slow, like play-by-post can be. But we're talking 2 weeks between turns because you have to post it out to everyone. But yeah, that's how we kept that sort of excitement of playing those games going, and we kept it going. And those kind of turns, we would have how it would work. Each player would write what their character was going to do or what they wanted to do. It was kind of their dream of what they wanted to do, and it wouldn't necessarily be what actually happened. It would all come to me, and then as the DM, I would pick out different parts of what they were doing and create this narrative. And these turns, as we called them, would be 3 or 4 pages of A4 long. Each player would be writing that much, and maybe only a quarter of it is what would get used. And then I would put it all together into, a 4 or 5 page document. When we started, it was all handwritten because there was no PCs or printers that we were using. So I wrote everything out individually, and then I would photocopy it and send it by post to all of the players. Then it grew and grew, and then I got a typewriter, and I started to do it on typewriter, and then was still photocopying it. And I would be charging them for the turns. So they'll be paying for the cost of the stamp for each turn, plus the cost of photocopying however many pages it was. So it was something like 50 pence a turn in British money, about $1 in US money. And yeah, it worked out quite well. And they would pay in stamps. So that every turn they would send me stamps for the next 6 turns or something. And I would just use those stamps for the postage. And it worked out great. Not making any profit on it, but it didn't cost me anything apart from time, which was quite a lot back then. But, for the enjoyment, it was fun. So yeah, that was how I started with this sort of play-by-post, and it started off with different names. Originally, it was called Craig's PBMs. That's my name, and then we developed it, and it became this Knife's Edge PBM, and that's where the name comes from. It's still stuck today. Okay. And then when forums came about, I was introduced to forums, and we decided, maybe it's time to start changing over to something a little more electronic. So we set up this forum system and started doing it like that. Then I discovered exPlane. And I can't remember when it was, maybe 5 years ago now. And I heard Kelleth who's the developer of the site, on some podcast. Don't even know what the podcast was. And I looked back through my history of what I was listening to at that time, couldn't find it. But I heard an interview with him describing exPlane. And I was like, this is exactly what I need. So I moved over. I brought my one remaining game that was still running, a Call of Cthulhu game, put it on exPlane. And that was it. I didn't go back to the old forum. We moved everyone over to this forum, and then we got going. From there, I started adding more and more games in and building it up.
So with the your original forum, then presumably it was fairly bare bones. It was basically just text. So any kind of dice rolling or something like that would have been had to handle in some unique way.
Exactly. It was all done. Yeah, it was all done manually. And in fact, I was the one doing the rolling because I didn't trust the other guys to roll their own dice because they were still teenagers and they were still like trying to, I got a 20. So it was, I was doing all the dice rolling and then it was all put in manually. But yeah, that was one of the great things. The great things about gamers playing the opportunity to have a dice roller that everybody can see, and it's all up front, and yeah, it's great.
Yeah, the dice roller is pretty unique, and there's probably one way to fake it. It's like if you can delete your own post, you could just keep posting until you get the results you want. But other than that, yeah, you can't really edit it. Like you can't change even the description of the rules. So it's
yeah, that's right.
I haven't seen it abused at all yet.
Yeah, and thankfully we're all adults now, so maybe the winning isn't such a big deal about it, and it's more about the taking part. But yeah,
everybody's got the one friend who rolls, and they roll and their hand cups the results. It's like, oh yeah, I got a 19, and then they put the dice, and oh, did you?
Yeah.
We're 30, right? We don't have to cheat anymore.
No, that's it. Yeah.
So you've got a pretty long gradual process of using mail and then forums, and then one of the more second generation forums, I guess, like Gamers Playing with dedicated tools.
Yeah.
And what's the third generation, do you think?
Who knows? Yeah, well, maybe it'll all be connected in a chip, and we'll just, it'll be like a live game. We won't even need, forums or anything like that again. We're just, right, I'm going to do this. Okay. We get the message.
Yeah. So you've run these long games. Your play-by email games by necessity, they're quite long. Did they last for years and years in the same kind
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the first game that I started on Gamers Playing, which was transferred over, it's a Cthulhu game. It's currently still running. It's the Shadows of Yog-Sothoth is what it's currently listed as, and that was the campaign that we were running through when I first started. But the characters from that game have been going probably since 93, 94. So that's sort of it's sort of a multi-campaign thing that's been stretching for a long time. Yeah, and one of the guys in that game is one of the guys that I used to play with live over the table way back when, who I brought to the site. So he's still with us.
Is that the one that plays Laura Leia in Warhammer?
No, actually, no. His username is Matt Johns, which is his name. Hi, Matt. Call out. But the one that plays in your Warhammer game, who plays the elf. I can never remember her name, Laurelin or Leadriel. He N Sanderson is the username. He's one of my oldest friends, so he's from back home in the town I come from, and he plays in that, and he plays in my other Warhammer game, the Ashes of Middenheim game. He plays Irandil. Yeah. He likes elves, and usually female elves that look like Gothic women. Yeah, that's the common theme with him. Yeah.
I have a bad taste with elves from going back from AD&D in the 90s. Is they got a +1 bonus on using a longsword and a +1 on a longbow, and so all of my players were just like mad for pluses, right? They always played elves because they wanted that +1 bonus, right? And I just like, I'm done with elves. So I used to make fun of them all the time. It's like, hey, let's think this through. Your character is 100 years old, but you have the same skills and abilities as a 14-year-old human. Like, how dumb are elves, right? Like, we're talking some deep brain damage dumb, right?
Yep.
Like, just that what's really going on, like, in this culture. So I used to make fun of them just repeatedly, just at length in these long diatribes, because I wanted them to play something else.
Fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot of power gaming like that went on, especially in those teenage years where people wanted to bet the best of everything, and yeah.
So how do you keep a game going that long?
No idea. I've got no secrets, honestly. I mean, certainly since we joined, because my original group, they were a group of old friends that all stuck together no matter what through these gaming. So I tended not to get people ghosting. Gamers Playing obviously different because there's so many new shinies going on. So a new game pops up and somebody says, all right, I'm going to quit this game and go to the next one, and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, to keep the same game going, the only thing I can suggest is, just keep bringing in new blood while it's still going. and while it's still interesting and bringing new people in, and I've had games that I've started that just fizzled out and we ended up abandoning. But for these long running games that I've had going on for a long time, that's what I've done, and it seems to have worked for me.
Yeah, well, I guess with like the Warhammer game I'm in with you, it's 5 years old or something like that, and continue.
Yeah.
I'm sure I wasn't in the beginning of the adventure. I think I was playing later. And so, but I think it's been fairly solid. Maybe it's just invisible that the new players come in.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we do have a lot of new players in these Warhammer games that come and then disappear. And we've had a number of dwarves in both games that seem to just disappear. There seems to be a curse of the dwarves on these Warhammer games. But it's quite a running joke. But
yeah. So these games, Call of Cthulhu, Warhammer, I'm not sure what else you're playing, but these are games that have been around since the early 80s, and large, like the one campaign you talked about, the Yog Sothoth game, that's from 1982.
Yeah.
No, because I just launched a game of that.
Right. Okay.
And so I was reading it and I'm like, well, this is pretty great stuff. Like, I really want to get some players through it.
Yeah.
But so there's kind of like an old school kind of vibe to what you're doing. Have you, I think we talked a little offline about maybe leaning on some of the older games. So
yeah, I mean, I tend to avoid newer systems. I mean, second edition D&D was the last D&D I played. I never really played any 3 or 3.5. I've never gone into Pathfinder. I'm terrified of 5th edition, and I'm about to enter the Bowl of Spinach 5th edition game, and I'm panicking. Do I know what I'm doing? But I think I've got a little bit of confidence from hearing you talking about how you can start new systems or play new systems through PvP, because you can just read as you go and make it up as you go along. And I think from a player's point of view, that can work as well. So I'm going to give it a go and see. But I'd love to play 5th edition over the table, but I just look at these books and I really haven't got time to read all these rules and learn how to do it all over again. And
yeah. And
I think. Sorry, just back to your question of about using old material. I think the stories were much better in these old adventures, and maybe the mechanics are not as smooth as they are in newer games. But for things like these old Cthulhu games, like Masks of, I'm not going to try and pronounce the last name, and Shadows of I think the stories in those are fantastic, but that there are problems with them, mechanically, and especially when you get into the middle of Yog Sothoth, that's really difficult in the Scottish element of the game to keep the thing moving, because they really don't give you very much at all. They give you a bunch of characters and say, yeah, do this, and that's it. But I quite like pre-written adventures, and I like to run pre-written adventures with the text already written. I don't have to think too much about, creating a whole big block of narrative. I've got it all there, and I can just, mix it up and switch it about a bit.
Yeah, and you have the advantage of everything's kind of coherently thought out. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It's difficult to plan that stuff in advance without doing all of the work in advance. So.
That's right. Yeah, and I think with the Warhammer games, there's a lot of sort of political intrigue in the background that takes a lot of work as a GM. If you're writing that yourself, it's quite a lot of work to do.
Yeah. So back in those older games, I was thinking about this earlier today. Maybe I'm way off base, but it seems to me that the systems are really about, here's a set of abilities and mechanics on how a character works, but no real details or mechanical elements on what the character is about or moving a story forward.
Sure.
Whereas you move into later games like Fate and Fudge and Powered by the Apocalypse and other games where players' actions actually change the plot. They actually influence the story rather than just execute an action. And and that which the GM can then in turn interpret to change the plot, of course. But that sort of story-driven mechanic is built in later.
Right.
I wonder if that's what you're avoiding.
Yes, that's what you've just said is completely new to me, and I never knew that had anything to do with those systems. So it's like straight over my head. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm maybe I'm wrong about that.
It sounds interesting. It might be something that would make me look into it if I knew it was that different. But, yeah.
Yeah, I know with some of these games, they suggest when you set them up, you just have no plans whatsoever. Just don't even think about that. The players will give you the plans based upon how they create their character, and then that creates mechanics that they can use to help you interpret the plot. And
yes.
And which all seems like just like Greek nonsense.
And I kind of do that naturally in my games anyway. So I encourage the characters to have some kind of background that I can latch onto and bring something into the game. So I will add something extra to the written campaign based on somebody's background, and you might go off on a tangent doing something related to your background.
Yeah.
So
so that kind of brings up in a longer game. There's a plot, right? So the characters are invested in achieving something. Maybe in Warhammer, it's not allowing the whole country to fall to evil and chaos. But how do you encourage characters to develop over that kind of period of time? Or is it just something that you think your players just tend to on their own?
For those that want to do it, I think it happens naturally. I think they will, sort of try and build it into the character. And if we think about your character Eldrin in the Warhammer game and this sort of his hypnotism background, I'm always desperate for you to use that hypnotism to try and you've got a guard tied up, and you need to ask him some questions, and then somebody else stabs him, and that's it. Is okay, it's gone. But we have the opportunity to try and do that kind of thing. Then it's great, and it can build in. But yeah.
So what challenges do you find in running, other than having to bring in new blood? What challenges do you find unique to play by post in running these longer games?
Keeping everybody interested enough to keep posting on a regular basis. That's quite difficult. And I'll have some games where I really need somebody to post, and then they don't post for a while, and I have to keep poking people and say, look, we're waiting for you, kind of thing. I don't like to run on the story without leaving somebody behind, as it were, that I know was a regular poster and still is, but has taken a little break, and it's that sort of worries me a little bit, holding them back too much.
Yeah.
But I don't like to push people either, because we're there to have fun. It's not a job. So
yeah, and that's an old standby. It's like the players are around. You've seen them post in other games, or maybe you've even talked to them on the phone if they're old friends. And if they're not contributing, then it's hard to move on without them.
Yeah. I've got some players that ignore me on Discord now because I'm constantly poking them on there. They ignore me on the mail, on the internal mail. So I go to Discord instead, and I get the same response. They just disappear. But you know who you are if you're watching this, so I'm not going to say anymore.
Yeah. One of the problems I find with longer games, and this is a little bit true for Warhammer as well, is if we've been playing this game for a few years, or 5 for some of your players, how do they remember all the plotty bits? Like there's a lot going on. We're following some clues and some chain of events, and I was like, well, who's the guy that died on the cart that when we had the golden skull that we got? What was his name again? Father something or other.
You're asking, but you hit the nail on the head. You have something that if it was over the table, you'd have mentioned like 2 hours ago. Instead, for us, it's 12 months ago. And it's how did you remember that? And I try to throw in You know, for example, documents that you found 2 years ago that are relevant to this piece of plot. I will say, oh, this character has remembered it. Or I might ask for something like an intelligence roll for them to remember what it was, if it was a while ago in game terms. But yeah, it's quite a tough one to handle when people forget about what's happening. And I have characters that forget what happened in the last page, let alone 12 months ago. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes well, anyway. Well, I guess the hard part then is how do you keep track of all that? I've played mystery games before, like Call of Cthulhu, and they can really revolve around some of those details. Like you see the clue, you pick it up later on, but it's been 18 months, right? That you saw this thing in passing, and unless the GM is on top of it and just actively poking you and say like, oh, hey, just for no reason, go read this post back from December 2019.
It has to get a bit like that sometimes. In one of my Cthulhu games, they finally come across the big bad in this particular chapter, and this person hasn't been mentioned for about 2 years. So they're like, well, who is this? But they don't realize who it is. They've met her before and they know that she's the villain. But yeah, with her appearing, it's like they're not quite sure what's happening. So you need to help them along sometimes. Like, oh, you remember this? This is the one that nearly killed you 2 years ago.
Yeah. And one of the advantages of play by post is that we can go back and reread those. We've got a full transcript of everything that went on. We just need to really find it, which can be hard.
Now imagine doing that when you've got an A4 binder full of turns from the last 3 years and having to find which turn it was that this detail was mentioned. So yeah, it's a lot easier. At least I would love a search function that would do that, where I can look for a particular term in exPlane, and that would be awesome. But yeah, it is quite a challenge.
Now there is a search if you use Adam's extension for Chrome.
Sure.
And then it gives a little search icon at the top, and it'll search the current thread. But if you've got 6 or 7 chapters, and with each individual threads, you'd have to search them all individually. But it is better.
I've started using the Adams add-on. I think it's fantastic, but I've not figured out all of it yet. So yeah, things like that, I had no clue there was a search function. So I'll give that a go tonight. Yeah.
It's it can be pretty useful. The other thing I thought about doing in a longer game was just listing creating an index, just a separate thread. And it's like, here's links to the various plot elements. And so you can go back and say, well, when did we fight the troll under the bridge or whatever? And then here's troll under the bridge fight. You just click that and you can go to it. And
I'm writing that down. That's a great idea. Yeah.
I'd like to say that I've implemented it successfully, but
yeah. I have a lot of good ideas like this, but I forget about them by the next day. You know, it's the kind of thing you remember at 11 o'clock at night, and then suddenly it's gone. Yeah.
I've got this phone. This is how I access GamersPlane, right?
Yeah. So I heard. Yeah.
So a lot of the things that are really easy to do on a laptop or a PC are just much harder on a phone, like creating indexes and finding things. It's all really small text rather than a big screen.
Yeah, I've used my phone on a number of occasions using it, and yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah. So I want to go back to this 5th edition thing.
Sure.
You've played a lot of these games a fair bit, and probably have generated some mastery and intuitive knowledge of like how Warhammer and Call of Cthulhu work. At least you know where to look, right?
I know where to look. Yeah, that's the key.
You know the rules exist. You know where to look roughly, and so it's not hard to find. It's like, oh yeah, I remember critical hits. There's a table somewhere, and but so you've got none of that mastery or an inherited knowledge or ingrained knowledge on these systems. Is that really what you think is the holdback?
I think it is. Yeah. And it's I try to play it over the table. I've got a 10-year-old daughter, and I tried to introduce her to 5th edition, and it was really difficult. And I've only got the PDFs, and I'm used to using books. So I'm sort of trying to go through it on my laptop, and even though I've got bookmarks in there and that kind of thing, I'm still like, it's too slow a process when you don't know the system back to front to be able to GM it without knowing it. So
Yeah.
hopefully it's going to be easy on exPlane.
Well, I've said before that if I'm running a game in real life, I want to know the game. Like I'm going to have to read all the rules enough that I can teach the rules to somebody else and answer unusual questions, or at least know where to find the answers. But if I'm playing a game on GamersPlane, I'll have created the game, set up the first post. I might not even have opened the rule book. It doesn't matter. Like we're not playing just an endless series of skill checks, So most of it's role playing, and you've got time to look up things when it comes up. But that's probably not the best way. But yeah. So how long do you think it would take you playing at the live table if you were a player to learn something like 5th edition or Savage World or something?
A session or two, and I'd pick it up. But it's just if you sit there and play it with somebody, you can easily pick up rules, and you can see what other people are doing. And I know if I think back to when I was in college and I was joining different gamer groups that I'd never played with before, and I was playing games that I'd never played before, I would just watch them, and you pick it up quite easily. But yeah, if you're GMing, I need to read everything and understand everything, and I simply don't have the time to read everything. That's the issue, is time. So yeah. And I'm a very slow reader as well.
One of the problems with play-by-post is that, as I describe it, you touch the system rarely. Like maybe you make a skill check once, and then 3 weeks later they ask you to make another one. It's like, oh, it's like 3 weeks ago. What was I supposed to do? So you got to go back and look it all over. So you need to relearn. And I found this with Warhammer too, is that I'm fairly lazy. I kind of rely on my ability to bullshit way too.
I didn't notice.
So periodically, whenever I have to do something in Warhammer or what have you, I've got the PDF on my phone and I'm scrolling through, and I'm like, I wish this thing had an index. So I know what I'm looking for, but I have no idea where it is. And and just looking for these rules on how to do things, so I don't have to ask for it, right?
Yeah.
So it takes a long time to learn these things on play-by-post, because it's rare that you're actually having to use the knowledge.
Yeah. And I have the same thing with new players because I welcome new players into especially my Warhammer games, and that don't know the system. And for things like combat, because I don't make them really combat heavy, but there's quite a bit of combat in there. That's the nature of Warhammer. And things like critical hits and that kind of stuff, and knowing what you need to roll, it's not automatic for everybody. So I have to sort of, give pointers here and there. And maybe a sort of breakdown of the rules in a forum thread would be helpful. And when you have a roll of 6 on damage, this is what you do, and that kind of thing. Not something I've thought about before, but that'd be a good idea as well.
Yeah, I've tried to do that in teaching systems. Just put a general mechanics thread, like here's how initiative works, or this is how combat works, or skill checks, or critical hits, that sort of thing. And nobody reads them, but at least they're there.
Sure. It's there. You've done your part. Yeah.
It's like, did you read the thread?
Yeah.
You can at least post it to them and say, read this part.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. Are you familiar with Warhammer 40K?
The war game, yes. We used to play when I was in college. We had 40K war games going on, and we created our own role-playing game from the war game. So this is before Games Workshop had even created that kind of thing. So we had our own, and I think now they've got a number of different systems around role-playing in that world. But yeah, that's as far as my knowledge of it goes.
Now, as far as I know, there's a lot of similarities between Warhammer and it, as if they were 40,000 years apart. But it's
that's the universe. The idea.
Well, that is the idea.
yes, absolutely. So the same chaos gods exist in the 40K world as far as I'm aware, and it's the same sort of thing. Yeah. And of course, you have the dwarves and the orcs and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. What else we got? I think I mentioned in the video I recorded yesterday, which people will see in like a month, that I'm pretty introverted, and which is probably why I'm the last person to do these videos. but the idea is that it just takes a lot out of me to be in a game session, right? And that's even true on Roll20 or what have you, or live games. It's less so with your friends.
Mm-hmm.
But you brought up offline this idea that introverts sometimes become or feel the need to be actors in games.
Mm.
Yeah.
What's your response to that?
Well, I am an actor, like in games, and it kind of comes up in these videos when I started doing these crazy accents.
Yeah.
But
do you enjoy pretending to be somebody else as an introvert? Do you enjoy that process?
Yeah.
Would you rather be someone else than being? I mean, you use Qralloq as your name. I assume that's not your real name. So you're playing a character now, in a way.
Yeah, that's true.
As are we all. Yeah. I mean, I'm an introvert. All my friends, and some of them may argue with me, but they're all introverts as well. And I think there's this need to pretend to be somebody else when you feel that way in order to act among a group of people, or on camera or whatever it is. And I think this acting is a big part of it. When I left school, I wanted to be a chef, and I trained to be a chef, but I was sort of half pushed, half moved into management, and I became a restaurant manager. And in restaurant management, there is a ton of introverts working there, but they're all acting and pretending to be somebody else. And you'll find the same in entertainment industries, like comedians and actors. A lot of them underneath are introverts, and they want to, they want to put on this persona because they don't want to be themselves. They want to be somebody else. But when you speak to them in person, they're very quiet and, don't talk a great deal and that kind of thing. And it uses a lot of energy for them to be themselves. And I think that's the same goes for gamers, and certainly a lot of people that I've spoken to in places like exPlane. I think a lot of us have the same problem, if it is a problem.
Yeah. Well, certainly we have no problem talking. Like the idea of being an introvert isn't about shyness, though sometimes they correlate. It's about, like you said, it's that level of energy drain, whereas somebody who's extroverted just seems to be replenished by the same kind of interactions that drain us. Yeah.
I would agree.
Bastards. Yeah. So I guess my question then is this correlation between acting and being an introvert. Do you think people that that are actually extroverted act less, or they're more likely just to be themselves?
How do we know who the extroverts are? My wife behaves like an extrovert, but she's not at all. And when you see her on her own, she admits herself she's an introvert. But if she goes to a party, she's the life of the party. Yeah. And so maybe we're all pretending. Maybe we're all introverts and we're all pretending.
My father's that way. He's like the most outgoing person I know. He just goes on vacation, and suddenly, like at the end of a week, like half the people around him are best friends, right? I'm like, how did you meet these people? Like, I'm hiding in my room, right? Because I had to deal with the waiter. but he claims that he's an introvert, and but like you said,
I mean, thinking back to my school days, and when I was role playing the most, I think those kids that were extroverts weren't playing role playing games. Yeah. They were out playing sports, which leads to one of your questions that you usually ask about sports. But they were all out playing football while we were spending 9-10 hours around a table rolling dice.
Yeah. So do you watch sports, play sports?
No,
Anywhere?
not
No?
at all. I used to be interested in football, as in English football, the real football, not the other one. And yeah, I sort of drifted away from it 16, 17 years old. I trained to be a referee at the end of school and was quite interested in that respect. But I think football in the UK at least became all about money, and it became who had the biggest money, got the best players, and ended up at the top of the league. And I lost interest, and it was, yeah.
So you're not watching the Euros then?
No. I was forced to watch the last 10 minutes of the game because my wife insisted on putting it on. And my daughter's in kind of a sweepstake at school where they've picked out a team, and whichever team wins at the end gets a prize. And she's got Italy as her team, who are of course in the final against England. So she's really torn as to who to support during the game, because she's going to win a prize if Italy wins, but she's got national pride if England wins. So, you know, we'll see what happens. I'm sure I'll be forced to watch the final tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's on here. I went to soccer camp, or football as we call it, soccer.
That word just grates against English people, soccer. When we hear that word, it's like soccer, dirty word. Yeah. It's okay. It's okay.
I lived playing that as a child. Like, we used to play these Mayan apocalypse endurance matches at lunchtime, right? There'd be like 50 kids on the field, and everybody was screaming. There'd be one ball, and just somebody would come in bloody after every recess.
Sure.
Lunch. And so it's just like this blood sport, right? We're just mad for it. And then in junior high, so middle grades, I went to soccer camp, football camp, and and that sort of thing. But then eventually just stopped caring. I don't know.
Right.
What it was about that particular sport that drove me away from it. But
okay. And what do you watch currently? Is hockey and basketball and that kind of stuff?
Well, mostly the rugby derivatives of football.
Okay.
Canadian and American. I played rugby for most of the 90s, and
right.
And so it's probably my favorite of all the sports.
Okay.
And not that American style football has anything to do with rugby. But,
yeah, rugby is one of the sports we're forced to play at school, sort of 14, 15. And as a little bespectacled guy trying to play rugby, it's not a great, not a great look. So yeah, I didn't get into rugby at all. I avoided it. Cricket, I preferred. I could play cricket quite well, but yeah, that was about it.
I played on a military team. There was almost entirely military personnel, and then a few of us civilians, and just big drunk people. Like, we're all just drank a lot. We were angry and hungover during every game, and and I was small, like 155 pounds. So what is that? I don't even know. 70 kilograms.
We use pounds as well, so it's okay.
Yeah, 11 stone.
11 stone, yeah.
And you be drunk and still hungover, and then you have to tackle this like 400-pound guy coming at you towards you just gotta grab him, let him fall on you, and yeah, not good when you're small.
Yeah. Have you played Blood Bowl then? If you're a rugby fan?
No, a lot of my friends did, and but I was never really that interested in board games.
Okay. Yeah, Blood Bowl's pretty cool, and I wish I could find a way to do that in PvP, because it's an awesome game, and I've still got a copy up in my loft upstairs. So that's a game I have to teach my daughter when she's ready for it.
Yeah. Now you have, I think we connected a little while ago. You were running a review process for a magazine, fiction novels and role-playing games, I think, as well. You're still doing it?
Yeah.
You're still connected?
Yeah, it's the society. It's the British Fantasy Society. It's a group of writers and fans of the genres fantasy, horror, and science fiction, that kind of thing. And it's 20 years ago now, I joined as the reviews editor for independent publishers. So I would get publishers send me material. I would have a team of reviewers send the reviews out, and then I would edit the reviews, put them online, or put them in a magazine, and then later became online. Yeah, so I was doing that for 20 years. In fact, this year I got an award for my long service with the BFS as the Carl Edward Wagner Award, and which I'm very proud of. But now I've quit, and I'm not doing the fiction anymore. Yeah, I quit in January of last year, and I got the award this year. But I'm still doing role-playing rewards for them. So yeah, I've kind of still got a foot in the door. Yeah, so I'm trying to get role-playing publishers to send me material that I've got a team of reviewers that can review, and get those onto the site, and try and bring some of these fans of fantasy that have never role-played before into the hobby, and hopefully onto gamers playing would be good as well.
Yeah, that's one of those weird connections, I think, that people, when they were kids, I presume, start reading fantasy or science fiction, and then kind of naturally leads them into role-playing games. And very few people find it as adults, like fantasy as a genre, as adults, and then from there glom onto role-playing games. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think a lot of adults that didn't grow up with fantasy see fantasy as childish, and they don't see it as written for adults. And of course, there's a lot of fantasy that's written specifically for an adult market. But a lot of them come in through horror, so they might start reading horror and then start dipping into the softer sort of fantasy side of the genres.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, horror. It's a good one. Harrigan, in the interview I put out yesterday, one of his things is that there's just remarkably little statistics on role playing and role players. Like we do not get marketed to, or so there's no censuses of our opinions or our stories, and who knows how many people are playing play by post at all.
Yeah, it's true.
And you look at a site like Gamers Playing, how many players would you think there are that are active, like posting once a week or more?
I've really got no clue. I occasionally dip into that list of players and look for the green dots of which ones are on at any given time. And you see a lot more of the Z markers of people that have gone inactive than you do see those current ones. Yeah. But you see the same names over and over again. And we see, obviously in Discord, you see those that are ultra active that want to be even more active than just on the site and speaking up. But yeah. Have you got any figures?
No. User Adam and Runkendig probably do, because they've gotten access to the database and have done some looks at it, and it's probably certainly less than 200 active users, right. maybe less than 100, and which is a lot. It's not like it would be hard for us to name 100 people on this.
Yes. Yeah.
But
I would struggle to name more than 10. So, but I imagine maybe 30 to 40 people regularly active. But I'm surprised if there are 200 on there. That would be that's good.
Well, I don't know. Like I think 200 is an upper limit, but it could be quite a bit less than 100.
Sure.
I'm always seeing new names, but the new names don't seem to stick around as often as people get interested in it, and they have a hard time either connecting with the pace or the format, and then they just disappear.
Yeah, I think the whole pace thing is the thing that holds people back. I think people come into it expecting it to be the same as playing over a table, and it's simply not.
Yeah, there's a number of proposed solutions for that. Like, could we put up a video or something that basically shows the pace of play by post, through like time lapse?
I said it'd be quite a long video without time lapse, but I'm glad you added that part in.
Yeah, but a game like your Warhammer game that's been around for 5 years. I don't know what the number of total posts in that game are. Let's say it's 5,000. Who knows? Well, we could probably find out very quickly. but showing that kind of pace and how the story develops over time might give people a clue on what they're really in for.
Sure.
Like it's hard to imagine playing the same game 18 months from now.
Yes. Yeah. And having only one stat increase on your character in that time. I got 100 XP after 18 months. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just looking up the stats on 6,485 posts.
Okay.
So,
and I think that's relatively low for a game that's been going that long. I see some games that have been around for a very short time and they're a lot more role-playing heavy, where there's sort of, 10 or 20 posts a day.
Yeah.
Those things exist.
Yeah. I was in one where there was definitely some days there'd be like 50 posts in a day. And it was hard to keep up. And especially we had an international community, a couple of people in Asia, and they would just wake up and it's like, I don't have time to read 3 pages worth of posts, right?
Yeah. There's got to be a balance there, hasn't there?
Yeah.
In the other games that you play, do you find that people write massive posts? Because my games, I as a GM tend to write short posts, and the players, I think, seem to follow suit and write very short posts. But do you play in games where people are writing, like a long 20-line thread at a time?
Yeah, for sure. I'm currently playing a game called Tales from the Loop. So this is based on a Swedish art project that turned into an Amazon Prime TV series. It's basically, I saw the show. Yeah. So the idea is that it's a kind of a Luddite's view of technology set in kind of a vision of 70s or 80s North America. So basically, technology doesn't really help people. It's just there and it randomly kills you. That's basically, I think, the theme from the show. It doesn't help anybody. It just occasionally children die. Anyway, in that game, it's all based upon we're playing characters that are 11, 12, 13 years old. And each post that people are putting up is probably 4 paragraphs long.
Right. Okay.
But that's pretty unusual. And, but I think
because I play so rarely in other people's games that I don't get to see what other people are doing. Yeah. So I can imagine there are games out there where people are writing, pages and pages, but I never get to see it.
Yeah. And I guess with those, the drama has to be interpersonal. Like it has to be about what your characters are going through, and rather than the events that they're immersed in.
Sure.
No, I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, the first post on Bowl of Spinach's game is pretty long, so I'm hoping, she's not expecting as much from me with my posts, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, she can be verbose.
Okay.
So I'm in one game by a user named Flying Succulent.
Okay. Yeah, I'm aware of that player. Yeah. And
her GM posts tend to be 4 or 5 paragraphs long. They're long and they're detailed. There's a lot of things going on. And then there's 2 players in the game, and our responses are generally 1 paragraph or sometimes less, because we're just reacting to something she's posted. But then she'll drop another 5 paragraphs. And
as a player, do you have a preference for which style of game you play in?
Well, yeah, that's a good question.
Because if you're in, how many games are you in? A lot, from what I understand.
Probably like 30. Something.
Yeah,
like
you must have a lot of reading to do when you wake up in the morning. And
yeah. Well, the advantage of having a phone is that I can just tackle them one at a time, right? When I've got a moment. Sure. Maybe at a red light. No, I don't. I don't read at the. I don't.
The Mounties are listening. Be careful.
Yeah, but yeah, you really just got to tackle it one at a time, because it can be a lot. And most posts when you're in that many games, it's not always your turn. So a lot of posts might be, the latest Warhammer post, and we're working through combat, and it might be a day or two before it gets back to Eldrin's turn. So just following along and making sure I'm not falling behind.
Yeah.
So those are easy to keep up with.
And how many games do you GM?
Yeah, well, the 30 would count games I'm GMing, which probably 20 I'm playing in and 14 I'm running.
Okay. Because I struggle with GMing 5. So that's quite impressive if you're running that many at a time.
Now, some of those, probably 8 or 9 of them are duets. So it's really just one player, one GM. And those are a lot easier to run. Simply
I've done a couple of those before. Yeah.
Multiplayer games where you have to keep motivating and engaging multiple players take a lot more effort. So I'm only running like 5 or 6 of those.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, I used to run more multiplayer games, but it's a lot of work and takes a lot of effort and time. Yeah, for quite a few less posts. Yeah.
And I noticed on Discord your wife popped in.
Yeah.
Is she active on GamersPlane as well? Does she play a lot?
She plays in games that I run.
Okay.
She tried one game that somebody else ran and it didn't work out. But she was a gamer before I met her. Like she started playing D&D in high school, and we met through a gamer, really.
Okay.
And so then after we got married, we basically she's in every one of my games, and has tried GMing as well. So she isn't as big of a fan of play by post as I am, or maybe nobody is. Maybe few.
Yeah, sure. I think even Kelleth's not as invested as you are in GamersPlane.
Yeah, Harrigan might be. There's others.
Right. Okay. You've got competition. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife's got no interest in role-playing games at all. Never has been a gamer. Oh, she claims not to be a gamer, but she plays these swipey phone games for 16 hours a day. So me and my daughter call her a gamer, but she says she's not. But she's got no interest in role-playing games. But I'm trying to get my daughter into it. And she's played on GamersPlane before. My daughter joined her. We had a children's game running at one point. I think it was Hero Kids or one of those games. And she was playing with a bunch of other children of other players. And that lasted for about 3 or 4 months. And then they all sort of lost interest and drifted away.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I tried teaching my daughter. We played a fair bit of a game called Tiny Horses, which is a generic version of My Little Ponies, and written by a guy who ended up becoming a friend. It was a small community, right?
Okay.
So him and I would just exchange fiction as well, because he would write novels and short stories, and I did as well. And so we just edit each other's work. And anyway, before he died, he got a second version of the game out, and so so I ran this and play tested his adventures with my daughter, and she loved it. But then just kind of one day just stopped, didn't want to anymore. She wasn't really not interested, but she just wasn't interested enough to dedicate any time.
Sure. Yes,
so, So total failure and part of a GM dad, right?
Well, I'm hoping this summer holiday is going to be the time to get my daughter into 5th edition, and we're going to start playing together and use the summer holiday to do it.
Yeah, my wife just has very little time for 5th edition. She's got a T-shirt that says 3.5 till I die. And anytime we start in games, like, we should play 3.5. I'm like, well, we've got like 60 books for the game, and they're all pretty, but I quite like 5th edition. I think it is a simpler game, but it is more coherent than other versions of D&D. Things just make more internal sense than they have in the past.
Yeah, I've watched Matt Colville playing his 5th edition D&D, and that's probably given me more interest in the system than anything else, and watching how that runs. But again, you don't get to see the mechanics of their game as much as you would if you're playing at the table yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and of course, Matt Mercer with his Critical Role series. I don't know if many of your friends watch that, but
not a one. But I just started season 2, the latest campaign. But even that's started, I think, beginning of either this year or last year. I've got no idea. But
no, season 2 where they start off in a circus.
I don't think I've even gone that far yet. I've listening to the first episode where they're just introducing the characters. So yeah.
Yeah, I haven't watched. There's too much, right? They drop like
it's a lot. Yeah,
3 or 4 hours a week. Like
I did start season 1 and probably got about halfway through, and then something else came up and I never went back to it. Yeah. And then recently I was watching, actually it was somebody on the site had mentioned the 5th edition videos that they've released, teaching what's it called, the Playbooker's Handbook, something like that, Handbooker's Playbook or something like that, where they're giving short videos on how 5th edition works. So I started watching all them, and I thought, actually, I forgot how interesting these guys are. Let me go back and start listening to their actual gaming podcasts or gaming videos. So yeah, I've literally just started, but I don't know how much time I can commit to that because I listen to a lot of other podcasts. So
yeah, another reason why I'm terrible at doing these things is, or I'm on the wrong feet to do them, is I don't listen to any podcasts or watch any YouTube series either. I used to back in somewhere around the time I found Gamers Playing. I was watching a lot of YouTube. 5th edition was D&D Next at the time, and people were really curious about what it would be because nobody I know played 4th edition. I just
right.
Like, we've got other things we could do. And so I was interested in gaming, and so I watched a lot of YouTube at that time, but not a lot since then, mostly because I think Gamers Playing just scratches the itches that I have. So
sure.
And
how big is it in Canada, role playing in general? Is it just small pockets of people, do you think, that are in the hobby, or do you see a lot of gaming shops around?
Well, there's the one in Calgary is probably the largest one in the world. It's called the Century Box. It's just massive. Like, it's just, you can't believe how big this thing is. And our local town, I'm in a town of 34,000 people. They've avoided becoming a city, so they're still technically a town. And we have one comic store, and the comic store runs on Sundays. They've got like open games, so you could go in and play D&D. But that's one store in 34,000 people. So yeah. And I don't think they're busy.
I mean, in central London, I've only ever found one shop that's dedicated to role-playing games, around sort of Leicester Square area, Orc's Nest it's called. And it's a tiny little shop. It's like a 2-floor shop, but it's minute. It's like the size of a living room. And you get all these, I won't stereotype gamers, but larger than average bearded men, all standing around together in this tiny shop. I don't know how they're doing during the current pandemic, when they have to limit the amount of people in at a time, but yeah.
My volume.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, they're doing postal sales now, which they never used to do. So hopefully they're making some money that way.
Yeah, Calgary is 1 million people, so it's quite a bit smaller than London. And there's probably 6 dedicated role-playing stores. Now, they'll have board games as well, but sell a significant amount of role-playing material. And we'll have game nights and that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I get most of my board games and everything online now from lots of different places around the country. So there are shops around the country, but it's a matter of knowing where their websites are these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and cognizant of not dropping a 4-hour podcast on people every week.
Sure.
We should probably limit our time.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it was great to talk to you, and
Likewise.
thanks for.
Am I the first Brit on your interview so far? Because it's been very Canadian heavy, I've noticed, but I've obviously not seen the ones that you've recorded prior to this one. So,
well, maybe yes. I think you are.
Excellent.
Philosopher, I interviewed a couple weeks ago. He lived and worked in London for a time, but I think he was Canadian at the time.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay. Well, the rest of you, contact Qralloq if you want to, come and have an interview. I'm sure I'll have a chat with you. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Represent the UK. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Adam is from the UK.
Yeah. Oh, you've got to get him on then. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks for being my GM.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. It's been a good time. And I'll be speaking to you on the board soon.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Take care. Have a good evening.
Right. Thanks, Knife Edge Games. This is Qralloq, and this has been Gamers Explain. Well, I'd like to thank Knife Edge Games for joining me today on Gamers Explain. It was great to connect with them. I told a story, I think it was in the video, of how I quit one of his games many years ago when I was running out of time, and he eviscerated my character on the dock even before I got out of the game. Anyway, that was great, and congratulations, Knife Edge Games, on recently wrapping up a 5-year campaign of Call of Cthulhu. It's just amazing that games like this can stick. And he's launched a sequel game with some of the same players and same characters moving into the new game. So it's a format that takes a long time to get a lot done, but there are ways to do it right. And so he's clearly doing that. Next week, I'll be talking with Khaki Phil, and he's someone I have not, well, I've played with a little bit. And what we talked about largely is things like working out what the right challenges are for players based upon mathematics and encounter design. And so that ended up being not really a lot of math, but a lot of great thought. And so it was a conversation I wasn't really sure how it would go, and ended up having a great deal of fun and engagement in it. So I'm looking forward to bringing that to you next week. This is Qralloq, and this has been Gamers Explain.